They called it the Golden Age, but I just called it Tuesday. Out in the belt. You don't measure time in ages. You measure it in dwindling oxygen reserves and the slow creep of microfractures across your viewport. The news feeds were always full of it. Of course. Basking in the glow of the visitors. Our saviors from the void, who'd arrived not with demands, but with gifts. They'd reversed the planet's failing climate in a decade. Cured plagues our best minds had battled for centuries, and handed us the keys to clean, limitless energy. They called themselves the Curators, and they promised humanity a place in their grand, cosmic gallery of advanced civilizations. Most people on Earth and the inner colonies swallowed it whole, cheering as the Curators' silver, teardrop-shaped ships descended into every major city, erecting spires of living crystal that hummed with benevolent power. They saw salvation. I saw a cage being built, shimmering and beautiful, but a cage nonetheless. My name is Jax. I'm not a soldier or a hero. I'm a junker. I pilot a rust bucket salvage hauler called the Vagrant, and my business is picking through the bones of humanity's less golden ages. Dead satellites, abandoned mining outposts, forgotten research stations. The solar system is a graveyard, and I'm the guy who digs up the tombstones for spare parts. It was on a run out past Neptune, chasing rumors of a pre-Exodus science vessel that had gone dark 200 years ago, that I found something that wasn't on any star chart. It was a Curator vessel, but it was dead in the water, silent and cold. That was impossible. Their ships didn't break down. They were flawless, self-repairing extensions of their will. This one, however, was adrift, a faint gash along its mirrored hull suggesting something had gone terribly wrong. Greed won out over fear. The alloy on a Curator hull alone was worth more than I'd make in a lifetime. I latched on, cycled the airlock, and stepped inside. The interior was unlike anything I'd ever seen. It wasn't metal and wires. It was more like the inside of a living thing, with walls that pulsed with soft, internal light and air that smelled of ozone and rain. There were no bodies, no signs of a struggle, just silence. Following the faint energy signature of the ship's log, I made my way to the central chamber. What I found there wasn't a bridge or an engine room. It was a library. Thousands of crystalline spires rose from the floor, each one containing a swirling, holographic nebula of light. As I reached out to touch one, it flared, and images flooded my mind. Not data, but memories, feelings, an entire culture distilled into a single, agonizing symphony. I saw a race of silicon-based beings who communicated through resonating harmonics, their cities vast, crystalline forests singing in unison. I felt their joy, their art, their love. Then I saw the Curators arrive. They came with the same promises, the same gifts, and I watched through the collective memory of this long-dead species as their vibrant as chaotic music was slowly perfected. The Curators smoothed the discordant notes, streamlined the harmonies, and polished their culture until it was beautiful, symmetrical, and utterly lifeless. They hadn't destroyed them, they'd curated them, edited them, stripping away everything that made them unique until all that was left was a sterile, predictable echo. They were an exhibit in the gallery, nothing more. I staggered back, pulling my hand away as the spire went dark. I tried another, and another. A race of amphibious philosophers from a water world. Their complex societal structures flattened into simple compliance. A species of insectoid artists, they're chaotic. Beautiful hive sculptures deemed inefficient and replaced with perfect, uniform grids. The curators weren't saviors, they were taxidermists of the soul. They were turning the galaxy into a museum of dead things. And humanity was next on their list for acquisition. The ship's log, a small, floating orb of light, finally revealed what had happened. This vessel wasn't a standard ship. It was an archival transport, carrying the raw cultural data of their latest acquisition. The log spoke of a containment breach, one of the archived species, a race the curators had underestimated, had managed to retain a sliver of its original, chaotic self. It manifested as a kind of digital ghost, a virus of pure identity that corrupted the ship's systems from the inside, fighting back even after its physical form was gone. The ship had died, but it had taken its priceless cargo with it. I knew then that I couldn't just sell the scrap. I downloaded a copy of the ship's log and a sample from one of the memory spires the singing forest people onto a shielded data chip. Getting that information back to civilization was all that mattered. But who would believe me? The governments of Earth were lapdogs, drunk on the peace and prosperity the curators provided. The media was a mouthpiece, broadcasting endless streams of propaganda about our benevolent guides. To speak out against them was to be branded a lunatic, a terrorist. I needed to find people who lived in the shadows, people who already distrusted perfection. I needed the fringe. My first stop was a hollowed-out asteroid named Port Caliban, a wretched hive of smugglers, black marketeers, and political exiles tucked away in the Trojan belt. The air smelled of recycled sweat, cheap synthale, and ozone from faulty wiring. It was the last truly free port in the system, and it was run by a woman named Eva Rostova. She was ex-corporate intelligence from a forgotten Martian conglomerate, sharp as a monomolecular blade and twice as cold. I found her in her usual spot, the back booth of a dive bar called The Gutter, sipping something that looked like engine coolant from a shot glass. She had eyes that saw right through you, stripping away your lies before you'd even form them. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I slid the data chip across the table. "I have something you need to see," I said, my voice low. "It's about our new gods." She didn't even look at it. Her gaze was fixed on me. Everyone has something to sell. Jax, information is just another commodity. Why should I buy yours? Because this one's free. I shot back. And it's going to cost you everything. She finally picked up the chip, her fingers tracing its edges. She slotted it into a data pad, her eyes scanning the raw text of the curator log. I watched her face, looking for a crack in her iron composure. It came when I prompted her to access the memory file. I saw her pupils dilate, her breath catch in her throat as the silent song of the crystal people flooded her senses. When she finally looked up, the cold mask was gone, replaced by something I hadn't expected, a flicker of raw, ancestral fear. "They're erasing them," she whispered, the words barely audible over the bar's din. "They're not making allies, they're taking specimens. And we're next." I said, "We weren't fools. We knew we couldn't fight them. They had fleets of flawless ships, technology that operated on principles we couldn't even comprehend. A direct assault would be suicide. But the curators had a weakness, the same weakness as any god they relied on faith. Their control over humanity wasn't maintained by force, but by a carefully crafted image of benevolence. All we had to do was crack the facade. Their whole system is networked, Eva mused, her mind already shifting from shock to strategy. Every spire, every ship, every public terminal is linked to a central communications nexus in Earth's orbit, the Harmony Hub. They use it to broadcast their updates, their cultural guides, their propaganda. If we could get a signal into that hub. I finished. We could broadcast this. Not for long. Just a few seconds. Long enough to plant a seed. It was an insane plan. The Harmony Hub was the most heavily guarded object in the solar system, protected by a fleet of Curator patrol ships and a wave of quantum encryption that would fry any unauthorized system that tried to touch it. But Eva knew a guy. Of course, she did. His name was Silas, a disgraced data scryer who now lived in the lower levels of Port Caliban, his body a withered mess of pale skin and cybernetic implants. He'd been excommunicated from the official tech guilds for attempting to hack a consciousness into a toaster, or something equally heretical. He was paranoid, unstable, and probably our only hope. We found him hunched over a workbench, soldering wires to a device that looked like a metal spider. They listened through the light. He hissed without looking up, his voice a synthesized rasp. The photons carry whispers. Don't trust the light. We need to get a message past them, Eva said, cutting straight to the point. A big one. We need to piggyback on their signal into the Harmony Hub. Silas finally turned, his mismatched optical sensors whirring as they focused on us. You want to poke the celestial dragon, it will burn you to ash. We're already burning, I said. Just slowly. He stared at me for a long moment. Then a series of clicks and whirs emanated from his voice box. A sound I later learned was his version of a laugh. The dragon has a blind spot. It watches the front door. For armies. It doesn't watch the garbage chute. His plan was as brilliant as it was suicidal. The curators used micro wormholes to dispose of waste from the Harmony Hub, shunting refuse into deep space. The wormholes were brief, unstable, and blasted with radiation. But for a fraction of a second, they created a direct, unmonitored link to the hub's internal network. Silas believed he could build a data torpedo, a hardened transmitter that could survive the trip and upload our payload before being vaporized. The catch, we'd have to get within spitting distance of the hub to fire it. We pulled together a skeleton crew, me, in the pilot seat of the Vagrant, Eva, running comms and tactical, Silas, nursing his data torpedo like a newborn baby, and a pair of twitchy ex-ganger twins named Mace and Cinder, who owed Eva a life debt and knew how to handle the ship's jury-rigged weapon systems. The Vagrant was never built for stealth. We approached the hub under the cover of a solar flare, our hull screaming as radiation washed over us. Alarms blared, and the ship groaned in protest. They've seen us, Eva said calmly, her eyes fixed on her console. Patrol ships inbound. 2 minutes. Silas. How we looking? I yelled, wrestling with the controls as I tried to keep our trajectory stable. The dragon is waking up, he shrieked with something that sounded like glee. The chute is opening now. Jax. Now a hatch open on the side of the massive crystalline station, and a shimmering portal appeared for a heartbeat. I fired. The torpedo shot from our ship, a tiny silver needle aimed at the heart of the beast. An instant later, the Curator ships were on us, their energy weapons carving lines of brilliant white across the black. Evasive maneuvers, Eva barked, but I was already throwing the Vagrant into a desperate, bone-jarring spin. The ship's old frame protested, metal screaming. A blast caught our port engine, and the whole deck lurched violently. Through the chaos, a single green light blinked on Silas's console. Payload delivered. He whispered in awe. The song is in the machine. We didn't have time to celebrate. With our engine crippled, we were a sitting duck. We were going to die. But then, something impossible happened. The Curator ships stopped firing. They just hung there, motionless. And on every screen, on every channel, the broadcast began. It wasn't the calm, reassuring voice of a curator guide. It was the sound of a forest made of crystal, singing a lament for its own death. For 37 seconds, that haunting, alien music filled the comms channels of the entire solar system. There were no explanations, no subtitles, just a pure, unfiltered broadcast of cultural agony. It was followed by a single frame of text, written in a dozen human languages. Who will remember them? Then, just as suddenly, it was over. The normal broadcasts resumed. The Curator ships began their pursuit again, but their hesitation had given me the time I needed. I managed to coax a burst of power from our dying engine, enough to slingshot us around Earth's moon and into the cluttered darkness of the shipping lanes, where we vanished like a ghost in the fog. We were alive. We were broken, bleeding, and hunted. But for the first time in a decade, a seed of doubt had been planted in the perfect, golden garden of the Curators. We had made the gods bleed, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that they would never, ever forgive us for it. We ran silent for 3 days. No comms, no active sensors, just a ghost ship coasting on fumes and momentum, bleeding heat into the void through jury-rigged baffles Silas had fashioned from scrap plating and prayer. The Vagrant was a wounded animal. Her port engine was a slagged ruin. Her spine was bent from the force of the blast, and half her systems flickered between life and death with the maddening rhythm of a failing heart. We were alive, but we were crippled, adrift in the vast emptiness between the orbits of Saturn and Uranus. We were heading for a place that didn't exist on any official charts, a phantom on the star maps, known only to old-timers and outlaws Karen's Anvil. It was a decommissioned helium-3 refinery, abandoned decades ago when the process became unprofitable. It was a skeletal maze of rust and ice, orbiting a dead rock in perpetual shadow, a perfect place to disappear. The silence on the bridge was heavier than any gravity. Cinder was in the med bay, patching up a nasty plasma burn on Mace's arm. Silas had retreated into a fugue state, his mechanical fingers weaving a frantic, silent ballet over his console as he tried to purge any trace of our digital signature from the ether. Ava and I just watched the star-dusted blackness, the tension between us a tangible thing. We had poked the gods, and now we were waiting for the thunder. "They're spinning it," Eva said finally, her voice flat. She had managed to pull a few heavily encrypted news feeds from the inner system on her screen. A serene, silver-robed curator addressed a gathering at the UN. Its voice, a series of perfectly modulated chimes translated by the spire behind it, was calm, paternal, and dismissive. A minor data cascade, a side effect of the recent solar activity. It chimed. The discordant transmissions were the result of corrupted historical audio files. We are refining our systems to prevent such unsettling glitches in the future. Glitches? I spat, the word tasting like acid. 37 seconds of a dying soul's requiem. And they call it a glitch. What did you expect? Jax, a confession. Eva turned from the screen, her eyes hard. They hold all the cards. They control the narrative. To 99% of humanity, we're not freedom fighters. We're the static on their favorite channel. Annoying, but easily ignored. So that's it. It was for nothing. I didn't say that. She gestured to another feed. This one from a dark net forum. A chaotic stream of text. Listen to the whispers, not the broadcasts. The forum was a mess of conspiracy theories and panicked questions. Most users dismissed the event, but a thread was growing. Tagged Crystal Song. People were analyzing the audio, trying to decipher its origin. Some claimed to feel a profound sadness listening to it. Others posted artwork inspired by the haunting melody. It was a tiny crack in the placid surface of their golden age. But it was there. A seed doesn't become a forest overnight. Ava said, "We just gave it soil. Now we need to give it water. And stay alive long enough to see it grow." Karen's anvil rose out of the dark like the carcass of some great metal leviathan. Jagged towers of corroded durasteel were wreathed in a frozen mist of vented gases, its docking arms hanging limp and broken. I guided the vagrant into a cavernous, non-pressurized hangar bay, the ship's landing struts groaning as they took our weight. The moment the engines died, a profound, tomb-like silence descended. For the next week, we worked. I spent most of my time outside, patching the hull breach with plates scavenged from the refinery itself, the cold of the void seeping into my bones. Mace and Cinder worked on the engines. They're quiet. Efficient teamwork, a stark contrast to the chaos of our flight. Silas, meanwhile, was building something. He called it the Ghost, a device designed to mimic the energy signature of random space debris, a cloak of electronic junk that would, in theory, make the vagrant invisible to passive scans. Eva was our link to the outside world, our sentinel. She spent her days sifting through the dregs of the datasphere, looking for patterns, for whispers, for any sign that our message had done more than just fade into noise. It was on the 8th day that she found it. "They're not using their own ships," she announced, her voice tight with a new kind of dread. We were gathered in the mess hall, huddled around a portable heater. "They're not launching fleets or patrols. They're using something else." On her datapad was a news report from a Martian colony, a small community of artists and philosophers, known for their vocal skepticism of the Curators' benevolence, had been quarantined after a sudden outbreak of a lethal, fast-acting neurotoxin. There were no survivors. The official report was tidy, clinical, but Eva had cross-referenced the timeline with deep space sensor logs she'd bribed a contact for. A single, unidentified ship had entered Martian orbit, lingered for 17 minutes over the colony, and then vanished. It had no curator energy signature. It had no signature at all. They're sanitizing the infection. I realized, a cold dread washing over me. Anyone who questions, anyone who even discusses the broadcast too loudly, they're just erased. They're not just killing them. Silas rasped from the corner, his optical sensors glowing a dim red. Look at the energy dispersal pattern. It's designed to break down organic matter at a molecular level, but it also neutralizes data storage devices. They're not just killing people. They're deleting them from history. The Curators weren't going to use a hammer. They were using a scalpel. They had unleashed hunters, deniable assets to prune the branches of dissent before they could grow. They weren't gods of benevolence. They were gods of control, and their garden had to be perfect. The news sent a chill through our small crew. We weren't just fugitives anymore. We were a plague. And the cure was annihilation. The weight of it was crushing. We were 5 people on a broken ship at the edge of nowhere, up against an enemy that could rewrite reality to cover its tracks. For the first time, I felt the cold touch of true despair. It was one thing to go out in a blaze of glory. It was another to be quietly deleted. Your life, your fight, your very existence reduced to a footnote in a sanitized report. That night, as I was running a final diagnostic on the hull patch, a message alert pinged on my private console. It wasn't from Eva or Silas. It was an external signal, heavily encrypted and routed through a dozen dead relays. My first instinct was to delete it. It had to be a trap. But something stayed my hand. The encryption was old, human-made, a complex algorithm I hadn't seen since my short-lived and spectacularly unsuccessful stint in corporate espionage. It was a code built on paranoia and distrust, the kind of thing you only use when you believe the walls have ears. I isolated the console from the ship's network and opened the file. It contained no text, no audio, just a star chart. It mapped a location in the Kuiper Belt, a rogue planetoid designated K1138, and a single string of musical notes, transcribed in simple human notation. I didn't recognize the tune, but when I ran it through a basic acoustic synthesizer, the sound filled my helmet, and a shiver ran down my spine. It was a harmony. A simple, questioning harmony, designed to be played alongside the haunting melody of the crystal song. It was an answer. I took it to the others. Silas analyzed the signal, his sensors whirring with excitement. Ingenious. The carrier wave is embedded in the background radiation. It's a whisper in a hurricane. Untraceable. Whoever sent this knows their craft. It's a trap. Mace grunted. His arms crossed over his bandaged chest. They find us. They delete us. Simple as that. Maybe. Ava conceded, her eyes fixed on the star chart. Or maybe it's the first sign that the seed is sprouting. K1138 is home to the Archimedes Initiative, a deep space research collective. They went dark a year after the Curators arrived, officially to pursue theoretical science free from terrestrial distraction. Unofficially, they told the New Order to go to hell. Scientists, I said, skeptical. What are they going to do? Throw equations at them. Don't underestimate them. Eva countered. They're the ones who designed the original deep space comms relays, the very networks the Curators now use. If anyone knows how to find the cracks in their system, it's them. We were torn. To stay meant hiding, waiting for the hunters to inevitably find us. To go meant flying into a potential trap, trusting a ghost in the machine. The decision was still hanging in the air when the Anvil's ancient proximity sensors screamed to life. A ship had just dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. It was small, sleek, and black as a funeral shroud. It bore no markings, broadcast no identification signal, and its energy signature was a flat, dead line. It was one of them, the Hunters. Silas. Is the ghost ready? Eva's voice was ice. Theoretically, he shrieked. But its camouflage is designed for a stationary object, not for movement. We don't have a choice. I said, sprinting for the bridge. Everyone, strap in. We're leaving. The vagrant shuddered as I powered up the newly repaired main drive. The hunter ship didn't move. It just sat there, a black dagger pointed at our heart. I eased us out of the hangar, engaging the ghost device. On our screens, our own ship's signature dissolved, replaced by a chaotic mess of readings that looked like a small asteroid. For a moment, it seemed to work. The hunter remained motionless. We crept away, our hopes rising with every kilometer we put between us. Then, it moved. It didn't accelerate. It simply appeared 1,000 kilometers closer, as if it had folded the space between us. It hadn't been scanning for our ship. It had been scanning for our wake. The subtle disturbance our damaged engine left in the fabric of space-time. "They're not using conventional tracking," Silas yelled. "They see the echoes we leave behind." A lance of pure blackness shot from the hunter, not light, but a beam of absolute void that hit one of Karen's anvil's towers. The ancient durasteel didn't explode. It unraveled, dissolving into a cloud of component atoms. It was a weapon of disintegration. They weren't trying to disable us. They were trying to erase us. "I have an idea," Cinder said from the weapons console, her voice steady for the first time in days. "The refinery's main reactor. It's been decaying for 50 years. It's unstable. You'll blow us all to hell," May said, his hand on his sister's shoulder. "No," she replied, her fingers flying across the console, targeting the anvil's core. "I'm just going to ring the dinner bell." She fired a single. Low-powered plasma burst into the heart of the decaying station. The reaction was instantaneous. The old refinery began to collapse. A chain reaction of explosions ripping through its structure. A massive wave of raw, chaotic energy and radiation billowed outwards. It was the blast of a dying star in a miniature. Now I roared, pushing the engines to their breaking point and diving straight into the expanding cloud of debris and radiation. The ship screamed. The lights died. For a terrifying minute, we were blind and deaf, tossed about like a leaf in a storm. The radiation was so intense it would blind any conventional sensor, and the sheer chaos of energy would mask any space-time wake. We were hiding in the heart of a sun, hoping it wouldn't consume us. When we finally burst out of the other side of the cloud, battered and barely holding together, I looked back. The hunter ship was gone. The cloud of expanding gas and plasma was empty. Whether we had destroyed it or it had retreated, we didn't know. But we were alive. Karen's anvil was a funeral pyre behind us, our hiding place gone. Ahead of us lay the cold, dark road to the Kuiper Belt, and a single, desperate hope named KL-138. We weren't just running from the gods anymore. We were running towards the only other heretics in the solar system, praying they weren't just a different kind of monster. The journey to the Kuiper Belt was a long, cold purgatory. We limped through the darkness, a wounded ghost in the graveyard of the outer solar system. The vagrant was more scar tissue than ship at this point, held together by Cinder's desperate engineering and my own stubborn refusal to let her die. The ghost device was a constant drain on our power, and the life support system wheezed with the labored breath of a dying man. We lived on recycled water and nutrient paste that tasted of regret. The silence between us filled with the ghosts of what we'd done and the terrifying uncertainty of what lay ahead. Was the message a trap? Had the hunter ship been destroyed? Or had it merely reported our heading before the blast consumed it? Every flicker on the sensors, every phantom echo in the void, sent a jolt of adrenaline through my veins. We were living on the edge of a razor, and the fall was a long way down. Eva used the time to dig, using the stolen curator data as a key to unlock doors inside their network I never knew existed. What she found was horrifying. The sanitization campaigns weren't limited to Mars. Small pockets of dissent on Titan's methane rigs, a group of historians on Europa, a rogue comms hub in the asteroid belt. All had been silenced. Their disappearances explained away as industrial accidents, solar flares, or viral outbreaks. The curators were meticulous gardeners, and they were weeding out every voice that didn't sing in harmony. "It's a pattern," she explained one cycle, her face illuminated by the cold blue light of her datapad. "They don't move on a population until a certain threshold of cultural dissonance is reached. The algorithm is predictive. It flags communities based on search histories, communication patterns, even artistic expression. They're not just reacting to rebellion, they're trying to preempt it. They're killing people for what they might think I asked." The thought sending a chill through me. They're not people to them. Jacks. They're variables in an equation of control. And any variable that threatens the stability of the whole must be eliminated. It was a war of ideas, and the curators' battlefields were the hearts and minds of humanity. They were fighting us with peace, with prosperity, with the seductive promise of a world without pain. Our 37-second broadcast hadn't started a revolution. It had triggered an immune response from a system designed to purge anything alien to it. We were the virus. K1138 was our last hope for a cure. After 2 weeks of silent running, we saw it. K1138 wasn't just a rogue planetoid, it was an artifact. Its surface was a patchwork of geodesic domes and sprawling, crystalline structures that seemed to grow out of the rock itself, all of it shielded by a shimmering energy field that bent the light of distant stars around it. It was a city built by minds who saw science as a form of art. As we approached, a tight beam transmission cut through our comms, bypassing our firewalls as if they weren't there. "Vagrant," a calm, female voice said, "You're broadcasting enough temporal distortion to wake the dead. Power down your experimental cloak and follow the designated approach vector. And try not to bleed on the carpet." It wasn't a request. The message contained a navigation file that took control of our ship, guiding us with unnerving precision toward a section of the planetoid that shimmered and dissolved, revealing a hidden hangar bay. We were being reeled in. The hangar was clean, impossibly so, and lit by a soft ambient glow. As our ramp lowered, we were met not by soldiers, but by a single figure. She was an old woman with sharp, intelligent eyes and a cascade of silver hair tied back in a complex knot. She wore a simple gray jumpsuit, but she carried herself with an authority that needed no uniform. "I am Dr. Eris Thorne," she said, her voice the same one from the comms. "Director of the Archimedes Initiative. I must say, you've made quite a mess of the solar system's delicate tranquility. We had some help." I grunted, stepping onto the deck. Mace and Cinder followed, weapons held at a low ready. Ava and Silas brought up the rear. Thorne's eyes swept over us, her gaze lingering for a moment on Silas's cybernetic form. There was no judgment in her look, only a deep, weary intelligence. The crystal song, a bold move, reckless and beautiful in equal measure. You threw a rock at a god, hoping to wake the congregation. Instead, you woke the god's hounds. "So you know about the hunters," Ava said, cutting to the chase. "We know." Thorne confirmed, turning to lead us deeper into the facility. The corridors were not cold metal, but a warm, ivory-colored material that seemed to absorb the sound of our footsteps. "We've been monitoring their movements since they first appeared. They are the Curators' antibodies, efficient, silent, and utterly implacable. They are here to ensure the purity of the specimen. The specimen I asked. You mean humanity precisely. Thorn stopped before a large, circular door that irised open at her approach. The curators are not conquerors. Conquest implies a relationship between equals. They are collectors, and when a piece in their collection begins to show signs of unexpected deviation, they do not repair it, they replace it. Or, if the deviation is deemed too infectious, they sterilize the entire exhibit. The room we entered was the heart of the Archimedes Initiative. It was a vast, spherical chamber. In its center, suspended in a magnetic field, was a perfect, shimmering sphere of light, a miniature star, a contained fusion reaction that powered the entire planetoid. But surrounding it, projected in the air in a dizzying, three-dimensional array, was a storm of data. It was the network. The Curators network, laid bare. Every connection, every node, every whisper of data that flowed between Earth, the colonies, and the Harmony Hub was visible as a flowing river of light. It was the most complex and beautiful thing I had ever seen. We have not been idle, Thorn said, a note of pride in her voice. We built the original framework for this network. We know its secrets. We can't control it. Not completely. But we can listen. And we can see the patterns they try to hide. She gestured to a pulsating red strand within the data storm. This is their command and control stream for the Hunter fleet. It is encrypted with a quantum entangled key that changes every nanosecond. It is, for all intents and purposes, unbreakable. So we're screwed. Mace grunted. Not entirely. Thorn countered, a faint smile playing on her lips. You see, the Curators, for all their advancement, have a blind spot, a philosophical one. They believe in perfection, in order. They cannot truly comprehend the utility of chaos. Their encryption is perfect, but the physical universe is not. She pointed to a series of smaller, fainter lights orbiting the central data sphere. These are quantum relays, scattered throughout the solar system. They transmit the encryption key. The signal is instantaneous, faster than light. But to achieve that, it must pass through microfolds in space-time. And those folds, those tunnels, they are not perfect. They resonate. Her plan was as audacious as our own had been. She couldn't break the encryption, but she could disrupt it. The memory spire I had taken from the dead Curator ship, the Crystal Song, was more than just a recording. It was a piece of alien consciousness, a fragment of a culture that operated on principles of harmonic resonance. Thorn believed she could use the spire's unique frequency as a weapon by amplifying its chaotic, mournful song and broadcasting it through their own network of deep space transmitters. They could pollute the space-time tunnels the Curators used for their relays. It wouldn't break the encryption, but it would introduce static, tiny imperfections, momentary delays in the key transmission. For a fraction of a second, the Hunter fleet would be deaf and blind, their perfect connection to their masters severed. It's not a weapon to destroy them, Thorn explained, but a window of opportunity. During the disruption, their ships will be vulnerable to a conventional data assault. We can't destroy them, but we can talk to them. Talk to them, I scoffed. They're killing machines. No, Silas interjected, his synthesized voice filled with a strange reverence as he stared at the data storm. They are not. Look closer. He manipulated a console, zooming in on the Hunter command stream. He filtered out the layers of encryption, revealing the raw carrier signal beneath. It wasn't a steady stream of data. It was a call and response, a series of complex queries and verifications. The hunters are not independent, Silas rasped. They are extensions, drones. Their every action is a direct reflection of a central intelligence. They are not the ones making the decisions. Thorn nodded. He is correct. The hunters are puppets. Our goal is not to cut the strings, but to get the puppet master's attention. Her team had developed a virus, not of destruction, but of information. Our payload, the full, unedited log from the derelict Curator ship, the memory spires of a dozen exterminated species, and every scrap of data Eva had collected on the sanitization campaigns. During the brief moment of disruption, we would inject this virus directly into the Hunter fleet. When their connection is re-established, Thorn concluded, they will carry our message back to their master. We will force the Curators to look at their reflection in a shattered mirror. We will show them the ugly truth of their perfection. The plan was elegant, brilliant, and had 1,000 ways to go wrong. The broadcast required a massive amount of power, enough to cause a brownout across the entire planetoid, and it would act as a massive beacon, screaming our location to every Curator ship in the system. We would have one shot, one brief window to act before they brought their full wrath down upon us. The role of the vagrant was simple and suicidal. While the Archimedes Initiative prepared the broadcast, we were to act as bait. We had to draw as many hunter ships as possible to a single location, a dead zone in the Kuiper Belt where Thorn's broadcast would be most effective. We were the Judas goat, leading the lambs to a slaughter that might just be our own. There was no argument. We all knew it was the only way. As we prepped the vagrant for her final mission, Thorn pulled me aside. Jax, she said, her sharp eyes searching my face. You are a scavenger. You see the value in broken things. That is why you were the one to find that ship. The Curators discard what is imperfect. You reclaim it. Remember that. It is the single greatest weapon we have against them. We left K-1138 with a new engine, a full tank of fuel, and a heavy silence. Silas had modified the Ghost device. Instead of hiding our signature, it would now amplify it, making the Vagrant look like a massive, power-fluctuating battleship on long-range scans and irresistible target. We flew to the designated coordinates, a patch of space where the skeletal remains of an ancient comet field drifted like bone dust. And then we waited for 3 hours. There was nothing. Then they came. Not one, but 3 black ships, dropping out of FTL in perfect, silent formation, surrounding us. My hands tightened on the controls. This was it. Iris, we have company. I broadcast on the encrypted channel. The party is getting started. We see them. Vagrant. Her voice came back, calm and steady. Hold them there. The broadcast begins in 90 seconds. The hunter ships didn't fire. They approached slowly, methodically, like sharks circling their prey. They were scanning us, trying to understand the impossible energy readings we were broadcasting. 90 seconds felt like a lifetime. Ava, talk to me, I said, my throat dry. Their weapon systems are charging, she reported, her voice a low murmur. They're synchronizing for a full spectrum erasure salvo. 50 seconds. Silas, how's our payload? The torpedo is armed and ready, he rasped, waiting for the dragon to blink. 30 seconds. On the main view screen, the 3 ships began to glow. A terrible, light-swallowing aura building around their hulls. This was it, the end of the line. 10 seconds. They say first contact is supposed to be historic, I muttered, a bitter smile on my face. 5. Thorn's voice counted down in my ear. 4. The void around the ships began to warp. 3. It's been an honor, Jax, Ava said softly. 2. I closed my eyes. 1. The universe went silent. Not the absence of sound, but a profound, deafening quiet. The hunters' erasure field collapsed. Their running lights flickered and died. For a single, beautiful moment, the 3 deadliest ships in the solar system were nothing more than cold, dead metal. Now, Silas screamed. I slammed the firing stud. Our data torpedo, our message in a bottle, shot toward the lead ship. A heartbeat later, the lights on the hunter ships flared back to life. But they didn't fire. They just floated there, as if stunned. And then, as one, they turned. Not toward us, but back toward the inner system. They began to accelerate, moving faster than I'd ever seen them move, vanishing into the blackness from which they came. They were running. They were running home to show their masters the monster in the mirror. We had survived. But as I watched them go, I knew the war wasn't over. We had just knocked on the door of the gods and delivered their mail. And now, they were finally going to answer. The silence that followed their departure was more unnerving than the battle itself. We just floated there, the Vant Grant, a tiny, wounded speck amidst the bone dust of the comet field, the echo of our survival ringing hollow in the vast emptiness. We had poked the beast, and it had flinched. But a flinch is not a mortal wound. On the bridge, the adrenaline gave way to a creeping dread. We had shown our hand. We had proven that the Curators were not invincible, that their perfect system had cracks. And now, they would bring the full weight of their celestial garden down on us to crush the weeds. A message came through from Eris Thorn, her voice strained but steady. Payload confirmed. The virus has been accepted by their primary ship's system. It's in their network now. They can't erase it without purging their own command protocols. So, what happens now? I asked, my voice hoarse. Now, she replied, and I could hear the grim finality in her tone. We prepare for the storm. They will not send hunters this time. They will come themselves. The return to K-1138 was a somber affair. The scientists of the Archimedes Initiative welcomed us not as heroes, but as fellow soldiers returning from a battle in a war that was far from over. The mood in the planetoid was one of focused, determined preparation. They knew, as we did, that we had bought ourselves time, not victory. The data began to trickle in within hours. Ava and Thorn's people, working in tandem, monitored the Curator network, watching the ripples our virus was causing. It was spreading, just as Thorn had predicted, carried back by the hunter ships like a contagion. But the Curators were reacting. Vast sections of their network began to go dark, quarantined. They were cutting off limbs to save the body, sacrificing communication and efficiency for containment. The pristine, harmonious flow of their datasphere was becoming fragmented, chaotic. On Earth and the inner colonies, the effects were subtle at first. A public transport grid would fail for an hour. A shipment of luxury goods from the Curators would be delayed. The ever-present, soothing chime of their public broadcasts would be replaced by moments of jarring silence. Small things, but in a world built on the promise of flawless perfection. These tiny cracks were seismic events. Public forums were ablaze with confusion and nascent fear. The carefully constructed faith was beginning to erode. But the real response, the one we were all waiting for, came 3 days later. A single curator vessel, larger than any we had ever seen a mothership, a cathedral of silver and light, appeared in high Earth orbit. It didn't broadcast threats. It didn't deploy weapons. It just sat there, a silent, looming testament to their power. Then came the message, delivered not to the UN or the media, but directly to every personal device, every terminal, every screen in the solar system. The serene, chiming voice was gone. This voice was different. It was ancient, cold, and heavy with a weariness that transcended time. It spoke in perfect, unaccented English, and its words fell like stones into the quiet pond of human civilization. You are a fascinating species, it began, so capable of intricate beauty and profound ugliness. You build towers that scrape the heavens, and you dig graves for your own children with the same hands. We came to preserve you, to polish the best of you into a form that could last for eternity. The view on every screen shifted, showing the holographic image of a memory spire, identical to the one I had found. Inside it swirled a golden nebula of light. This is you. The voice continued. Your art, your music, your capacity for love and sacrifice, everything that is noble and worthy, curated and perfected. This is the version of humanity that will join our gallery, that will be remembered when your sun is dust. The image changed again, this time to a dark, corrupted-looking spire, pulsing with a sick, violent red light. And this is the rest of you. Your wars, your greed, your self-destructive chaos, the dissonance, the noise. For a time, we believed we could edit this part of you away, that we could help you prune the blighted branches. But your recent actions, your broadcast of pain, your infection of our systems with the memories of failed experiments, it has shown us our error. The voice paused, a moment of calculated silence that stretched across the entire solar system. The specimen cannot be purified. The deviation is too deeply encoded. Therefore, we must begin the archiving process ahead of schedule. We will take what is worthy. The golden spire reappeared, and we will sterilize the contaminated material. There was no mistaking the meaning. They were going to take a cultural snapshot, a digital soul of humanity, and then they were going to wipe the slate clean. They were going to kill us all. The message ended with a single, chilling directive. You have one solar cycle to prepare for ascension. Those who wish to contribute their consciousness to the archive may proceed to the nearest spire. Your service will be remembered. Those who resist will be forgotten. Panic erupted. The golden age shattered in an instant. Riots broke out in major cities. Some people flocked to the spires, desperate to be saved, to be remembered. Others attacked them, seeing them now as the soul traps they were. Governments collapsed. The fragile peace the curators had built dissolved into the very chaos they despised. They hadn't declared war. They had simply passed sentence and left humanity to tear itself apart in the face of the apocalypse. On K1138, a grim resolve settled over us. Thorn had been right. We had forced the puppet master to show its face, and it was the face of a cosmic executioner. They're not bluffing, Thorn said, her team analyzing the mothership's energy readings. It's charging a weapon, a waveform generator. The scale is planetary. It's designed to dissolve complex organic matter, leaving inorganic structures intact. They're not going to blow up the Earth. They're just going to turn it off. So, what's the plan, I asked. The words feeling futile. How do we fight a god? We don't, she replied, her eyes fixed on the swirling datasphere in the center of the room. We appealed to its congregation. Her new plan was born of pure desperation and breathtaking genius. The virus we had unleashed was more than just a collection of forbidden memories. It contained a backdoor, a hidden protocol Silas had embedded within it. The protocol was designed to do one thing: find the source code of the curator's own consciousness, their original cultural memory before they began their endless journey of collection and sterilization. Every collector is driven by a memory of something they've lost, Thorne theorized. They are preserving other cultures because something happened to their own. If we can find that original memory, their own crystal song, we can broadcast it back at them. We can't fight their weapon, but maybe, just maybe, we can remind them of what it feels like to be the ones on the verge of being erased. It was a shot in the dark, an appeal to an empathy that might not have existed for millennia. To do it, we needed to get a signal booster close to the mothership itself. Its shields were impenetrable, but our virus had revealed a flaw. The ship had to vent excess energy from its weapon systems through a series of thermal exhaust ports that opened for mere seconds at a time. If we could get a ship to one of those ports, at the exact moment it opened, we could upload the trigger for Silas's protocol. It was a suicide mission, and there was only one ship expendable and fast enough to even attempt it. The Vagrant was stripped down to its bare essentials. We removed excess plating, cargo holds, even the life support for the aft sections of the ship. Cinder and Thorne's engineers managed to slave the weapon's power conduits directly into the main drive, creating a system for short, terrifying bursts of acceleration that threatened to tear the ship apart. This time, the crew would be smaller. Just me, Ava, and Silas. Mace and Cinder were to stay behind, to help Thorne prepare the broadcast itself. The farewell in the hangar bay was brief and heavy with unspoken words. Mace pulled me into a rough hug. "You bring her back. Jax," he growled, nodding toward his sister. "That's an order." Cinder just looked at me, her eyes saying more than words ever could. She handed me a small, metallic token. "For luck," she said. "It's a piece of the first engine I ever rebuilt." As we flew toward Earth, the solar system was a changed place. It was no longer a peaceful, unified territory. It was a war zone. Small, desperate fleets of human ships, remnants of the Earth Defense Force, colonial militias, even repurposed civilian vessels were throwing themselves at the Curator mothership in futile acts of defiance. We watched as their ships were swatted aside like flies, their weapons absorbed harmlessly by the vessel's shimmering shields. It was a slaughter, but their sacrifice wasn't entirely in vain. They were creating chaos, a screen of debris and conflicting sensor readings that gave us the cover we needed. "They're creating a storm for us to hide in," Ava said, her voice filled with a pained respect as she guided us through the wreckage of a fallen cruiser. Silas was a whirlwind of motion, his consciousness jacked directly into the ship's systems, monitoring the mothership's energy fluctuations. "The weapon is at 90% charge," he reported, his voice a flat, synthesized stream of data. "Thermal venting will commence in 3 minutes. The port will be open for 4.7 seconds. We were a needle flying toward a haystack that was on fire, in the middle of a hurricane. I could see the mothership now, filling the viewport. It wasn't a ship. It was a continent of silver metal, its surface a crawl of intricate patterns and shifting light. The scale of it was humbling, terrifying. It made our desperate mission feel like a child throwing a pebble at a mountain. 1 minute, Silas announced. I'm detecting a spike in their internal security scans. They know something is close. Just hold on, I muttered, my knuckles white on the controls. We were flying on pure nerve, dodging chunks of molten metal and the lances of energy the mothership used to swat away the attacking human ships. The port is beginning to open, Silas yelled. On the dorsal spine, Sector Gamma 7. I saw it. A section of the ship's hull, the size of a city block, began to iris open, revealing a blindingly white core of pure energy. I engaged the thrusters, Cinder's modifications screaming in protest as we shot toward the opening. We were going to make it. And then a shadow fell over us. A Curator patrol ship, one of the smaller teardrop-shaped vessels, materialized directly in our path. It must have been hiding in the mothership's sensor shadow. It had us. There was no time to evade, no time to fire. This was the end. Ava, I started to say, but she was already one step ahead. Silas. Decouple the cockpit module. Now she commanded. What no, I yelled. The Vagrant had a modular cockpit, an emergency escape system that had never been tested. We just need to get the signal close enough, she said, her voice impossibly calm as she keyed in the commands. The module has its own thrusters. The rest of the ship is just dead weight. Before I could protest, there was a jolt, a series of explosive bolts firing. Our cockpit, a tiny wedge of metal containing the three of us and Silas's device, separated from the main body of the Vagrant. The rest of our ship, our home, the wounded animal we had nursed across the solar system, continued on its trajectory. It slammed into the Curator patrol ship in a silent, brilliant flash of light. The explosion was massive, vaporizing both vessels instantly. The shockwave hit our tiny module, sending us tumbling through space. But it had worked. It had cleared our path. I wrestled with the controls, stabilizing our spin. Before us, the exhaust port was still open. It's now or never. Silas, I screamed. He didn't need to be told. He sent the signal. A tight beam of pure data shot from our module, a desperate prayer aimed at the heart of the God machine. It struck the energy core just as the port began to close. For a second, nothing happened. And then, the light from the mothership changed. The brilliant, silver-white glow began to flicker, shifting to a deep, sorrowful blue. On our comms, a new sound began to emerge, overriding everything else. It wasn't a song of crystals. It was a sound of crashing waves, of wind howling across desolate plains, of a single, lonely voice weeping in a language older than stars. We had found their ghost. We had found their own memory of loss. The mothership stopped charging its weapon. It just sat there, bathing the earth in its melancholy blue light, broadcasting its own ancient grief for all its children to see. We had rung the bell, and for the first time, we were hearing the sound of a god's heart breaking. The blue light washed over us, a silent wave of sorrow that seemed to seep through the hull of our tiny cockpit module and into our bones. The sound that came with it wasn't just audio, it was a feeling, a pressure in the chest, the psychic echo of a loss so profound it had shaped a civilization for 1,000,000 years. We saw flashes in our minds, unbidden and fragmented, a world of two suns, oceans of liquid methane, and towering silver flora that chimed in the wind. We felt the terror of an encroaching cosmic anomaly, a wave of null space that didn't destroy their world, but unwrote it, erasing it from existence so completely that only those who were off-world at the time survived, left with nothing but a perfect, agonizing memory of a home they could never prove had existed. They became galactic ghosts, and, in their grief, they found a terrible purpose to preserve what they could of other cultures, to build a gallery of souls so that no one else would ever suffer the perfect oblivion they had. They would become the universe's memory, but at a terrible price. They would edit, polish, and perfect, cutting away the ugly, chaotic parts of a species until only a sterile, beautiful artifact remained. They had become the very thing they feared, an engine of erasure. The grief song lasted for an hour. Around us, the human fleets had fallen silent, their battle cries and desperate transmissions replaced by a stunned, shared awe. They were listening to the heart of their enemy break. Then, the mothership began to change. The single, unified consciousness that had spoken to us, the ancient, weary voice of the collector, shattered. It was like watching a flawless crystal crack under immense pressure. Fissures of golden light raced across its silver hull. The great ship did not explode. It dissolved. It broke apart, not into debris, but into thousands of the smaller, teardrop-shaped vessels, each one now an independent entity. The god had crumbled into a pantheon of confused and broken angels. We watched as this new, chaotic fleet reacted. Some ships simply went dark, their lights fading as they became inert, drifting tombs. Others fled, accelerating to impossible speeds and vanishing into the deep black. A few, a terrifying few, seemed to lash out in madness, firing their weapons at nothing, at ghosts, their perfect control lost to the sudden, raw agony of their own rediscovered history. The great, monolithic threat was gone, replaced by 1,000 unpredictable variables. We were forgotten in the chaos, a tiny piece of flotsam in the tide. Our life support was failing, the air growing thin and cold. We had done it. We had broken the empire, but we were going to die here, unheard and unseen. I looked at Eva, her face pale in the dying light of the console, and Silas, a single red light blinking on his inert form as he conserved the last of his power. We had won, and this was our reward. And then, a light, not the cold blue of the Curators, but the warm, dirty yellow of a ship's searchlight. On the comms, a voice, cracked with static and emotion, yelled, "Jax, you bastards, you're alive. A ship, ugly and beautiful. A modified hauler from K-1138 was pulling alongside us. In the cockpit, I could just make out the figures of Mace and Cinder. They had come back for us. The months that followed were what the historians started calling the Silent Fall. There was no treaty, no surrender. The Curator Empire simply ceased to exist. Their network was a fractured ruin of ghost signals and dead ends. The spires on Earth and the colonies went inert, their crystalline structures turning a dull, lifeless gray. The fractured fleet, the individual Curator vessels, became a new and unpredictable feature of the solar system. We called them the Wanderers. Most kept their distance, silent observers. Some, we learned, were actively seeking out the data we had broadcast, trying to piece together the histories they had helped erase. They were penitents. Others remained dangerous, feral, lashing out at any ship that approached. They were the echoes of the Empire's rage. Humanity was left blinking in the sudden, terrifying light of a universe without masters. The transition was not peaceful. Without the Curators' enforced stability, old tensions flared. Factions rose and fell. For a time, it seemed we might finish the job the Curators had started, destroying ourselves with the very chaos we had fought to reclaim. But we didn't. Slowly, painfully, we began to rebuild, not a golden age, but something realer, something forged in fire and doubt. Eva became one of the architects of that new reality. She worked with Eris Thorn and the remnants of the colonial governments to form a new coalition, one built not on enforced harmony, but on mutual respect for the messy, often contradictory, nature of humanity. She argued, she negotiated, she fought, and she never once let them forget the price that had been paid for their freedom. Silas, after we rescued him, became something new. His brief, forced connection with the mothership had changed him. He could hear the wanderers. He could understand their fragmented, grieving thoughts. He became our first and only ambassador to the broken pieces of our former God, a bridge of wires and whispers, helping us navigate the new, strange relationship we had with the ghosts we had created. And me, I didn't take a seat on any council. I didn't want a monument or a medal. The war had left too many ghosts in my head, and I couldn't find peace in the halls of power. After a few months on K-1138, Cinder and Mace helped me rebuild a ship. Not the Vagrant. She was a pyre of memory I left in the void. This one was smaller, faster, built from the scavenged parts of a dozen different vessels. I named her the Echo. I went back to being a junker, a scavenger, but I wasn't looking for scrap anymore. I was looking for stories. I hunted for the memory spires the Curators had left behind, the archives of the species they had perfected. I traveled to the dead worlds they had sanitized, looking for any trace, any fragment of the people who had lived there. I became a rememberer. The Curators had wanted to be the galaxy's memory, a flawless, edited archive, but humanity, in our infiniteness, chaotic imperfection, had inherited the job. It was our responsibility now, not to curate, but to bear witness, to remember the songs of the crystal forests, the philosophies of the water dwellers, and the terrible, beautiful grief of the gods we had toppled. I drift through the dark now, a lone ship on the edge of the new frontier. I collect the echoes of what was lost, and I send them back to the Coalition, so that our new history books will be filled not just with our own story, but with all of them. It's not a glorious job. It's quiet, and it's lonely. But sometimes, when the starlight hits the viewport just right, I play the crystal song over the ship's comms. It's a sad, haunting melody. But it's not an ending anymore. It's a promise. A promise that as long as one of us is out here, listening to the whispers between the stars, no one will ever be truly erased again. We answered the silence not with a shout, but with a million different voices. And that, I've learned, is a sound no god, new or old, can ever hope to conquer.